This message is a presentation of Pinnacle Baptist Church and the preaching ministry of Pastor Ray McBarry. Other messages like this are available online at pinnaclebaptist.com. The church is located at 2517 High Falls Road in Griffin, Georgia. If you're in the area, we would love for you to visit us this Sunday. Now, here's today's message.
All right, so we're in Daniel chapter number 8 this week. And the vision that Daniel has in Daniel chapter number 8 is very similar in some respects to the vision that he had in chapter number 7. But the prophecies we had in chapter 7, now we're going to build upon those by what God revealed to Daniel here in this vision of chapter number 8. The vision that he receives in chapter number 8 occurs about 2 years after the vision he received in chapter number 7. So with that introduction, let's begin chapter number 8. It says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first." The vision he's talking about that had appeared to him at the first, of course, is the one that we saw in the preceding chapter, number 7. And you notice here, we're still in the reign of King Belshazzar. So even though chapter number 5 and 6 chronologically come after this, we're kind of going back in history now in the life and ministry of Daniel, while King Belshazzar, the Babylonian, was still the king. So this is during the Babylonian Empire. The Persians have not yet captured Babylon, and they're not the world power that has conquered Babylon. They are still, at this time, under the control of Babylon. And so that's the setting here that he gives us in verse number 1. Verse 2, "And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai." Now, I want to stop here for just a moment and talk a little bit of geography so we get a sense of what Daniel is seeing in the vision. He does not say that he was in Shushan at the time that he has the vision. He says that in the vision, he was in Shushan at the palace. Shushan was the city of Susa, which later will become one of the capital cities of the Persian Empire. It was a Persian city, had been for hundreds of years before this, but it was a Persian city that was presently under the control of Babylon, King Belshazzar and the Babylonians. Now, on the map up here, I want to identify just a few things so that you kind of get a bird's eye view of some of the places we're talking about. Of course, down here in the south, if I'll get the eraser out of the way, you can see here's the Nile River, and here's the Sinai Peninsula. So this is Egypt down here to the south. That would make this what? Greece. That's right. You could even figure that out from the preacher's drawing. I'm impressed. I'll have... Oh, now I know why she can figure mine out. Here is Greece. To the north of Greece was that mountainous country that we later saw Paul go on his missionary journeys. What's this mountainous country to the north of Greece? Persia. No, Persia is going to be further to the east. This is Macedonia. This, of course, is the modern-day country of Turkey. At the time, it was referred to as Asia or Asia Minor. It's a huge peninsula that juts out into this huge body of water. What's this big sea that we have right here? That's right, Brother John, the Mediterranean Sea. And I didn't draw it, but there's the little island of Crete. And there's the island of Cyprus, just south of Turkey. Then this, of course, is the Promised Land. This is the land of Israel. What's this lake up here at the top? up in the north? The Sea of Galilee, that's right. And then we have another large body of water to the south and east of Israel.
Is that Jordan?
Well, this will be the Jordan River, Mary, that connects the two. You're right. What's that large body of water to the south of the Jordan River? The Dead Sea, that's right. Or the Great Salt Sea, as it's sometimes called. Then further to the east, we have the Persian Gulf. Of course, it's still very much in the news even today. And just north of the Persian Gulf, we have two different rivers that run into the Persian Gulf. What are these two rivers? He's right. The Euphrates is one. What's the river that goes with that, TR? The Tigris and Euphrates. That's right. So here's the Tigris. And here's the Euphrates. The city of Babylon was located, you'll remember, on the Euphrates River, about right there. That was the capital city of the Babylonian Empire. It is also where Daniel spent probably the majority of his time serving in the government to the different kings of Babylon. The city of Susa, or Shushan, as it is spelled here in the book of Daniel, was to the east and to the north of the Babylonian Empire. It would have been somewhere off in this area here, and I probably don't have it exactly correct on the map because I ran out of room on my map. It would have been a little farther to the east than what I have it portrayed here on the map. But nevertheless, it is a Persian city. Now, the city of Babylon is in the modern day country of what? What country is this? We've been over there for quite a few years now. Iraq. The city of Babylon is in the country of Iraq. What is that country just to the east of Iraq? Iran. That's correct. Iran is the modern day country of Persia. Persia, or Iran, is a very, very ancient empire, civilization. And so the Persians are to the east of the Babylonian kingdom. And so this is the area that we're talking about in the prophecy here so far concerning Daniel's vision. So we see the vision. He sees in his vision that he is at Shushan in the palace. Now it's kind of interesting because the Babylonians are in control of the Persians at this time. Babylon has not yet fallen to the Persians, and yet in the vision, Daniel sees himself in the palace here, as though the Persians are in charge. Now, I'm sure there may have been a secondary type palace that the Babylonians used that had been built by the Persians, but it's kind of, it's obvious it is of the Lord that he saw himself here, because this is not yet really an important city. It's going to become an important city when Persia takes over Babylon, but right now this is where all the action is. But in the vision, he sees himself in Shushan, or the city of Susa. That's where he sees himself, in the palace. And I saw in a vision, I was by the river of Ulai. As best we can tell, Ulai is a canal, a very large canal that was built between two rivers that both ran very close by the city of Susa. And this canal connected the two rivers there. Verse number 3, here's what he sees in the vision. This is very important, so make sure you listen to what he's saying. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So he sees a ram. What is a ram, first of all? What kind of animal is this? It's a male sheep, that's right, and he has horns. He has 2 horns. The ram that he sees in this vision, he's a big ram, has 2 large horns, and it says the horns were high, but one was higher than the other. And the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beasts might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. Now, in ancient times, as you know, it was not unusual for the different kingdoms or empires to select an animal that was their symbol, their representative. Even today, countries have animals or birds to represent their countries, their kingdoms. In ancient times, the Persian Empire had chosen as its the animal or creature that represented their kingdom, the ram. And when the king of Persia would go out into battle with his troops, he always carried a ram's head on a pole into battle with him. So the ram, historically, was considered a symbol for Persia. This is going to correspond to the vision we saw in the previous chapter. Now, I've already used up most of my room drawing the map, and we're going to need the map, so I'm not going to be able to totally get rid of the map, but let me try over here to the side to remind us briefly of what we saw in the previous chapter, the previous vision. We saw 4 kingdoms. The first one was represented by a lion. The second one was represented by what? A bear. And then the leopard. And then what was the fourth one? The terrible beast. That's right. Unlike anything Daniel could describe. Which of these 4 kingdoms did we say represented Babylon historically? The lion, that's right. Which one did the bear represent? The Medo-Persian Empire. So this is the kingdom that now we're going to see in a little more depth, a little more detail in this new vision. This is also the empire that is portrayed by the ram in the vision we're having in chapter number 8. The one that was portrayed by the bear, there were a couple of things that were said about the bear in that vision last chapter. What was one of the things that was notable about the bear in that vision? Milton got both of them there. He's right. One, the bear was raised up on one side. And we said that seemed to be an indication that we now know, looking back on history, that even though it was the Medo-Persian Empire, an alliance between the Medes and the Persians, the Medes started out being the stronger of the two in the alliance, but over time they kind of dwindled out and the Persians became the very prominent party in the alliance. That's why today we call it the Persian Empire, not the Medo-Persian Empire in most of our history books. So just like the bear raised up on one side, representing the Persian rise to prominence, so too this ram has the 2 long horns and one of them that's longer than the other, but it comes up after the other one, signifying that the Persians rose to prominence after the Medes, but they overshadowed the Medes after rising to prominence. So we have a very good correlation to the bear in that respect. Then, as Milton said, the bear in chapter 7 had 3 ribs in his mouth. And we talked about the fact that very likely was an indication that it was the Persian Empire conquering the Lydian Empire up here in Asia Minor, the Babylonian Empire here, and the Egyptian kingdom or empire down here. Here we see in the description of the ram with the two horns, look what it says there. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward. I think here again we see a correlation with the three ribs. He's pushing northward. This would have been the Lydian kingdom. Westward would have gotten to Babylon and the Babylonian kingdom. And then southward down to Egypt. I think here we still have a correlation with the three ribs that we saw in the mouth of the bear from chapter number 7. So here is the Persian Empire. And it is said that no beasts might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will. You know, the Persian Empire, when it was conquering, it would just swallow up whole cities and whole kingdoms overnight almost. And one of the things that was most notable about the Persian Empire was up to that time, it was the most numerous, or I should say most populous empire of ancient times. The Persians even boasted in their invasion of Greece later on that Xerxes had an army of 1 million men that invaded Greece. Now, in all honesty, it's possible that could have been somewhat of an exaggeration by ancient historians, but the very fact that they would even say an army of 1 million men was something that would have been unheard of by any other ancient empire. It really just, no kingdom could stand before the Persians when they were in their heyday, so to speak. And that's the description we have of the ram in verses 3 and 4. Now Daniel sees another beast, though. Look at verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So he now sees a different animal, a goat, a he-goat. That is a male goat. You know, those male goats, they get considerably larger than the females. They have the long beards. And this goat, though, is different than most goats you would see. Goats normally have 2 horns. This one had 1 horn, but it was a notable horn growing out of the middle of his head there. What kingdom, what empire do you suppose this goat is going to represent? That's right. It's going to represent the Greek Empire, which in chapter number 7 was symbolized by the leopard with wings. What did we say was especially notable about the leopard and the wings? What did that say about the Greek Empire? It was fast, very fast. So too, I think you're going to see as we continue reading here about this goat. It says the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. It was a unicorn of sorts. 1 horn growing right here out of his forehead. We've already said that horns represent authority or power. In chapter 7, we saw that the horns represented kings. Who do you suppose is the king of the Greeks that is pictured by the notable horn? TR? Alexander the Great. I think that's it. And so we have this goat, a he-goat with 1 horn, who is coming from the west. Now here's the bear and the sheep, the ram. He's to the east. This is the Persian Empire. This is from the west. The goat is coming, which of course is the direction of Greece in comparison to the Persian Empire. It's interesting still that Daniel is receiving this vision about the Persian Empire and then the Greek Empire, even though at the time he receives the vision, Babylon is the empire that's still in charge. So both of these empires are still yet future empires, at least as far as running things. But he sees the ram, then he sees this he-goat coming from the west. which is, of course, a picture of Greece. By the way, just as ancient Persia was sometimes pictured symbolically as a ram, so too was ancient Greece oftentimes pictured as a goat with one horn. And so it certainly follows not only from this vision, but even from world history and the symbols that these two nations chose for themselves later on. Verse number 6, and he came to the ram, that is this he-goat, he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him in the fury of his power. Now, we already saw in verse 5 that the he-goat that was coming from the west, it said, he touched not the ground. What do you reckon that says about the goat coming from the west that doesn't even touch the ground?
He's very fast.
He's very fast. He's moving along. Here's the ram with the two horns, and the he-goat with the one notable horn is moving from the west. He's going so fast, he's not even touching the ground, and he plows right into the ram with the two horns. Wouldn't want to be the ram, right? Verse 7. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him. What's the word choler mean? Anger. That's right. That's exactly what it means, anger. The Persians, after they conquered Babylon, and after they conquered Egypt, and after they conquered the Lydian kingdom up here, the Persians later on also captured this area right here along the coast of Asia Minor. This is where the Greeks had set up a number of city-states. Troy, the ancient city of Troy, was one of those city-states. The Persians had conquered all of these Greek city-states. Then, as we discussed just a little while ago, the Greeks under Xerxes crossed over here and came along the land route down the coast into Greece, and at one point they even burned the city of Athens, the star city of Greece, to the ground. So the Greeks had much anger towards the Persians. Now, at the time Daniel is seeing this vision, none of this has come to pass. Persia's not even the empire of the day. Greek is still many years out. But he sees through the vision, the prophecy, that Persia one day would stir the Greeks up, and the Greeks with their notable horn would come flying from the west and plow into the ram because of the anger towards the ram. That's exactly what happened historically. Alexander the Great was able to rally the Greeks to invade the Persian Empire because the Greeks remembered what the Persians had done to Greece when they invaded their country so many years before that. The Greeks, of course, under the command of Alexander the Great, also conquered the known world at that time in record time. How long did it take Alexander the Great and his armies to conquer all of this right here? Anybody know? He actually went beyond the Persian Empire all the way to the Indus River Valley, which is in India. That's how far he had gone. Alexander the Great did that in 3 years' time, which was unheard of for the ancient world. Now today we have planes and tanks and other such weapons of war. Back then it's just men marching across the battlefield with some cavalry and maybe some elephants along the way. Elephants don't go very fast, and men don't march too awfully fast, especially when they're fighting every step of the turn. But in 3 years' time, Alexander the Great conquered the entire known world of his day, all the way to India. That certainly seems to represent this he-goat that's going so fast, moving so fast, he's not even touching the ground. It also represents, I think, very well correlated the leopard with wings that we saw in the vision of last chapter. Let's continue here. Verse 7, and he smote the ram and brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Did you know that as powerful as the Persian army was, and even though they had war elephants, which was unusual for that day and time, Alexander the Great and his phalanx army of Greeks and Macedonians conquered them it was almost like it was no contest. They were outnumbered by the Persians, and yet the Greek army, time and time and time again, delivered one huge blow after another to the Persians. 3 major battles that were fought, and eventually killed the king of the Persian Empire. Verse 8, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. What happened to Alexander the Great? What was his fate?
Didn't a bunch of his friends start attacking on him and stabbing him and stuff?
That was Julius Caesar, but that's a good story too. You're real close to being on track there, Milton. At the end of the 3 years of conquering everything that he had found to conquer, he was bored. His soldiers, after being away from home for 3 years and doing nothing but fighting for 3 years straight, they were ready to go home to their families, most of them. They didn't want to go on into India, which is what Alexander the Great considered doing. They were ready to go home. Alexander the Great was bored. He felt like there was nothing left to do. He had done everything there was to do. And he drunk himself into a stupor and died at the young age of 33 years old after having conquered the entire world and felt like there was nothing left to do. Now, there is some intrigue, and some people say perhaps he was poisoned. But the truth is, he ran out of things to do, was bored, and became a drunkard and drank himself to death. But that was right at the height of his power. And that's exactly what is prophesied here in the vision. When he was strong, the great horn was broken. It's exactly what happened to Alexander the Great. By the way, Alexander the Great had no male heirs. He had no sons to leave the kingdom to. So what happened after he died? Well, we see in the next part of the verse, and for it, the notable horn that was broken, came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. So when Alexander the Great died, not having a son, historically, what happened to the Greek Empire? TR?
The 4 different generals, the 4 generals that were his lieutenants.
TR's right. The Greek kingdom of Alexander the Great was divided up between his 4 top generals. Now, these 4 top generals were all vying they all wanted to control the whole thing, but they didn't have the power to take over the whole thing. So each general basically took over the portion of Alexander's empire where they had the most power. And here's the breakdown, the way that it would go up here on the board. One of the kingdoms included Macedonia and Greece. The second general had this area, which is called Thrace, and most of Asia Minor. The third one of the generals had this area, which was Syria and Babylonia on into part of Persia. The fourth one had Egypt. Now these 2 that you see up here, the one for Macedonia and Greece, and the second one for Thrace and Asia Minor, they're not going to be of any consequence in the rest of the vision. This one to the south, the Egypt portion of Alexander's empire, was ruled by his general Ptolemy, and for hundreds of years after that, the descendants of Ptolemy. The Ptolemies ruled Egypt for several hundreds of years. One of their most famous family members who ruled Egypt later on was Cleopatra. She was one of the great-great-great-granddaughters of Ptolemy. So they continued, the Greeks continued to rule Egypt for quite a long time. The other general that was of importance was the general who captured or controlled Syria, Babylonia, and part of Persia. His name was Seleucus, and this came to be known as the Seleucid Empire. Now this one is important, and this is the one we're going to now look at more closely as we continue Daniel's prophecy in the rest of the chapter. Verse number 9. And out of one of them, that is one of the four horns, came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. First of all, we've heard that term, little horn, before, haven't we? We heard that in the previous chapter, in the vision Daniel saw. Who or what was represented by the little horn in chapter 7? You've already forgotten. The little horn of chapter 7 was that horn that came up among the 10 horns of the terrible beast. The little horn is the one that we said looked very, very much like he is the Antichrist, the king of the revived Roman Empire who will be at the end times that is still yet to come. And so that was the little horn of chapter 7. Now here in chapter 8, we're going to see in play one of the things we've already talked about. Several weeks ago, almost a month ago, we talked about the principle of the double fulfillment of prophecy. And we saw several examples of a double fulfillment of prophecy. The little horn, we're going to see in chapter 8, is going to be another example of a double fulfillment of prophecy. So I'm just saying that so you know what to look for as we're going through here, and you'll remember the things we've talked about previously. It said, one of them came forth, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. The little horn comes out of the Seleucid Empire here, one of the four horns that rose up after Alexander the Great's death, when the great horn was broken. It says that his kingdom extended to the east, to the south, and to the pleasant land. This is the pleasant land. You're looking at the map here? This is the pleasant land. What land is this? It's where Jerusalem is. It's Israel. It's the promised land. It's where the Jews lived. And here's Jerusalem down here. So the pleasant land is the promised land. So it said that the kingdom of this little horn extends to the east, to the south, and to the pleasant land. This little horn that we're about to see is fulfilled 2 times historically. There's going to be a man who was a member of the Seleucid family who is going to fulfill part, but not all, of the prophecies in the rest of this chapter. He is what we looked at before, a partial installment, a prototype, if you would, of the real little horn who's coming in the end times, who's going to be just like, in many respects, this first man historically, but even worse. The little horn at the end times, we know from last chapter, is the Antichrist. We're going to see now the details about the exploits of one of the members of the Seleucid family who was a precursor, a forerunner of the Antichrist who's yet to come. Let's continue reading and see what it says about this little horn. Verse 10, it waxed great, that is the little horn, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Now, I have to stop here and say there is a disagreement among Bible scholars, even conservative Bible scholars, as to who the host of heaven is that the little horn stamps upon. Some Bible commentators will say this is talking about the Jews themselves, God's chosen people. Because remember the promise that God made to Abraham that his seed would be as the stars of the heavens, innumerable, and as the sand of the sea. So there are some Bible scholars who believe that the host of heaven, it's saying he stamped upon, were the Jews, God's physical chosen people. There are also some Bible commentators who believe that because this person is a foreshadowing of the Antichrist, it may also be talking about the fact that the one who is controlling the Antichrist has the power over angels as well. And, of course, that would be Satan. We know from the book of Revelation, Satan, who has a third of the angels to follow him. And they do battle, of course, with the angels that remain faithful and loyal to God. So, this little horn is either saying that he overcame and had power over the host of heaven, being the Jews, which we know is going to be true, but it might also be including the angels of God as Satan battles the angels of God, and until Jesus sends in the cavalry, Satan appears to be having the upper hand to some degree. Verse number 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. Now, here again, the prince of the host, it could be one of two people. I'm going to tell you both that Bible commentators say it could be. You can decide for yourself. It could be talking about the fact that the leader of the Jews. Because the man who was a member of the Seleucid Empire, who fits this description, was a man named Antiochus. I know it's a lot of history, but it's about to get really interesting. Antiochus IV was a member of the Seleucid family. I think he was 4 generations removed from Seleucus himself. Sorry, the 8th in the line. Antiochus IV, he gave himself a nickname. In history books, he's referred to as Antiochus Epiphanes. What does the word epiphany mean? If you have an epiphany about something, what does that mean?
Something came to mind there.
That's right. Something comes to mind. He called himself Antiochus Epiphanes because he said he was the one that was revealed to mankind. I'll show you how brazen this fellow was in his pride. While he was the ruler of the Seleucid Empire, he had coins made, and on the front of the coins had his face. How you like that, Caleb? At the bottom of the coin, underneath the image of his own face, he had the word Theos Epiphanes. And I can't get it all on there. Meaning the image of God. He had so much pride and arrogance that he had his own image on the coin, and underneath it, it said the image of God. Archaeologists have actually found a number of these coins. So we know that it's real. We know it's not just recorded by ancient historians. It actually occurred. This man thought very highly of himself. He thought himself God in the flesh. He thought he could do anything he wanted to do. During his reign, the Seleucid Empire for generations had been at war with the Ptolemies down here in Egypt because they wanted their land and they wanted their land. As the two were battling it out, look who's right in the middle. The Jews. The pleasant land is right in between these two empires that fought for several hundred years with each other. Anytime they wanted to invade Egypt, they had to march through Israel. Anytime the Ptolemies wanted to invade the Seleucid Empire, they had to go through Israel. Israel got caught between these two empires. The Seleucids, especially under Antiochus Epiphanes, were brutal to the Jews. On one occasion, when Antiochus Epiphanes led his armies down to Egypt and got beaten by the Egyptians, he had to march home, but in his anger at having lost to the Egyptians, he stopped at Jerusalem, and in 3 days' time, he killed 40,000 Jews and took another 10,000 of them prisoner back to Syria, to his empire. That's not all he did, though. We're about to get to the worst part. But when it says here in verse number verse 11, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. One of the things he did while he was there in Jerusalem on one occasion is he had the high priest of the Jews killed, summarily executed, along with many others. So some commentators say that the prince of the host that it's referring to here is the high priest that he had killed. Of course, it could also mean, speaking of the Antichrist, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, that is, even to Jesus, because the Antichrist will be so blasphemous, he will pronounce himself the Messiah. That's why we call him the Antichrist. He puts himself in the place of God in the person of the real Jesus Christ. But then it says, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced and prospered. Antiochus Epiphanes, for all the bad things we've already said about him, hold on to your seats, it's about to get even worse. When he was in Jerusalem, he went into the temple, and after having killed the high priest of the Jews, he had a statue of Zeus erected in the temple of the living God. And on the altar where they offered a morning and an evening sacrifice every day, an animal sacrifice, he did the one thing that was the most defiling, the most blasphemous that could possibly have been done on an altar where animals were sacrificed to Jehovah. What is the one animal that Jews are to have nothing to do with? The pig. Pigs. because they're considered unclean. Now, I know there's some other unclean animals mentioned in the Old Testament, but when you think of unclean animals, the one that comes to mind is the pig, the pork chop, the barbecue. But the Jews weren't to have anything to do with pigs, swine. It's why even in Jesus' day and time, the Jews did not raise pigs. The Gentiles raised pigs, and the Samaritans, who were half and half, they raised swine, but not the Jews. Antiochus Epiphanes offered a pig as a sacrifice on the altar there in the temple. He offered this pig to the god Zeus in the temple of Jehovah in Jerusalem. Now, not only was that the most blasphemous thing he could do in the Jewish religion, but it totally defiled the temple, polluted the temple, so that the temple could not even be used without it being symbolically cleaned up and rededicated to God. It was not for another 4 years during the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucids that the Jews rose up and were successfully able to kick the Seleucids back out of the pleasant land, and they went back in and rededicated the temple to Jehovah God. But for over 4 years, the temple was unable to even be used. There was no way they could go in and offer sacrifices to Jehovah on an altar where a pig had been slain and offered to a pagan god. That's how bad this fellow was. It says here in the verse we just read, verse 11, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. The Jews weren't allowed to offer their sacrifices, and they wouldn't have anyway, because the temple was polluted. Now it says here, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. This is one of the indications that leads us to believe that Antiochus Epiphanes is a partial fulfillment of this prophecy, but he doesn't totally fulfill the prophecy. Antiochus Epiphanes polluted the temple, made it where it couldn't be used by the Jews, but he didn't tear down the temple. That's a good reason to believe that this is a double fulfillment that will be completely fulfilled by the Antichrist in the tribulation period, who very possibly may tear down the entire temple after desecrating it. You say, what temple? The Jews don't have a temple in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount right now. No, they don't have one right now, but it is strongly suggested by those who should know that Israel right now has all the materials to erect a new temple that are in warehouses around the city of Jerusalem, waiting at a moment's notice for a new temple to be put up on the Temple Mount right now. It may happen before the rapture, or it may be after the rapture takes place. But there's going to be another temple of the Jews on the Temple Mount there in Jerusalem during the tribulation period. Very likely that this is one of the things that indicates Antiochus Epiphanes was a partial fulfillment, a foreshadowing of the Antichrist, but he doesn't fulfill all of these things that we're told the little horn will do. Verse 12, and host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. I know you're going to find this hard to believe. There were actually a small group of Jews who became traitors to their own people and worked with Antiochus Epiphanes to help him while he was running the show in Jerusalem and in the land of Israel. It's very possible that those traitorous Jews are the ones that are spoken of here when it says, and host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. Perhaps it was their transgression of their treason, or perhaps it was simply talking of his transgression in defiling the temple. But it says he cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced and prospered. Prospered, of course, means to be successful at whatever you're doing. When I think of the word practicing in this sense, I think what comes to my mind is practicing Satanism, practicing witchcraft. That's certainly what the Antichrist will be doing, and it's really what Antiochus Epiphanes was doing in offering sacrifices to Zeus and false gods. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The Jewish calendar has an even 30 days every month. So if you take 2,300 days and divide it by 30 days, you'll come up with a little over 6 years of time that we're looking at. The time that Antiochus Epiphanes was in control of the pleasant land was just about that amount of time. A little over 6 years that he was in control of the land of Israel. And after he was gone, after the Maccabean revolt pushed the Seleucids out, they rededicated the temple in Jerusalem to Jehovah so that it could be used again in worshiping Jehovah. By the way, the first Hanukkah that the Jews celebrate to this day, Hanukkah was the name that the Jews gave when they rededicated the temple after driving the Seleucids out, where the pig had been sacrificed on the altar. That's where the Hanukkah celebration comes from. So for 2,300 days, this man would have his way there in the land of Israel, in the pleasant land, and it said that the sanctuary would be trodden underfoot. One last thing, and we're going to stop for tonight. This sacrifice that he made on the altar of God of a pig is called the abomination of desolation. Now, you know what an abomination is? Yeah, it's something that's horrible. It's not just something bad, it's something horrible. That's an abomination. Desolation, or the word desolate, means uninhabitable. So what this is saying when it's called the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that maketh desolate, is that the temple could not be used. It became unfit for the worship of God. Now, I introduce this term to you before we close tonight, because if you'll read Jesus speaking and teaching in Matthew chapters 24 and 25, when he's talking about the end times, he refers to the abomination of desolation from Daniel's prophecy, and he says, the one that happened back here, there's another one coming in the end times. There's another one that's yet to come. He, of course, is talking about when the Antichrist will desecrate the temple during the tribulation period. So we know from Jesus' own words that the abomination of desolation performed by Antiochus Epiphanes was a partial fulfillment, but not the full fulfillment of the abomination of desolation that is still yet to come. So Antiochus Epiphanes, this little horn, is a foreshadowing of the Antichrist, just like the little horn we saw in chapter 7, who comes out of the terrible beast. There are similarities between them. Any questions or comments before we stop for the evening?